And here's my concern. If Diddy is convicted of trafficking based solely on Jane's story, we may be opening a slippery slope. Hey y'all, welcome back to H Blues Word. I'm your host, Stacey Brewer. And let's get deep into this crazy Diddy trial. I know it's been a minute since I've spoken on this particular trial, but look, I don't ever have to hear FO again in my life and don't want to. But let's talk about days 20 through 27. But let's first start with Diddy has denied all allegations and he has pleaded not guilty to every single charge. I have to say that. But let's not sugarcoat it. This trial has been a whirlwind for sure. I've had the opportunity actually to observe parts of it in person, and I'll link my straight out the court video below. And what I've seen and heard has been disturbing. We've had multiple accusers with horrific stories, shocking testimony from former employees, and some serious legal questions being raised. Now, today I want to focus on something specific, and that is the trafficking allegations, particularly around Cassie and Jane Doe, and what this case could mean for how we as a society define coercion, exploitation, and relationships in the legal system as a whole, especially for folks who don't have Diddy's level of money or power to fight for these kind of charges. Now, let me be very clear. I believe Cassie was trafficked. The allegations she's made span years. Coercion, violence, manipulation, blackmail. She says that she was forced into these FO sessions, multi-day illegal substance-filled events involving escorts, humiliating acts. Some of these took place while Diddy allegedly watched or filmed. And I heard from a known journalist, now this is a rumor, but this journalist said that one of the FO videos reportedly shown to the jurors may have depicted Cassie completely unconscious. Now, if that's true, that's not just disturbing, that is not consent. That's evidence of coercion, possibly even assault. Now, add to that the infamous hotel hallway video where Cassie says she had just left an FO and Diddy runs after her and physically drags her back to the room. That's not a heated lover's quarrel, that's force. Now, Diddy claims that he was just trying to get his phone and bag back. But when security is called and Cassie leaves seemingly with that same bag and phone, that explanation kind of falls flat in my opinion. Now, that video alone to me proves the trafficking claim on the Cassie side, because for trafficking, you need two things: a commercial act, and that's check. I mean, you have escorts being paid, and then you have force, fraud, and coercion. Cassie arguably meets all three of those. But when we get to Jane Doe, victim number 2, I'll be honest, I'm kind of torn on her. I saw part of her testimony live, and Jane says that she was misled into thinking she was in a real relationship with Combs, but instead was used for the same FO events as Cassie, and was involved with workers and illegal substances and manipulated emotionally. She says Diddy threatened to release tapes to her ex, which could be considered coercion. But here's where it gets complicated. She also acknowledged moments of genuine affection outside of the FO situation. Times where she initiated the FOs, texts where she said she didn't want to participate, but others where she said she did. So there's this back and forth. And to me, for the average juror, that potentially introduces reasonable doubt. Now, yes, Cassie also had some affectionate messages that were shown, but her relationship with Diddy spanned 10 years. So a lot of those messages were early. And she explained that the fear behind those messages, that like there was intimidation, there was control. For example, she described how he allegedly chased her down anytime she tried to leave. So that paints to me a fuller picture of control. But with Jane, look, there was an incident where she testified that after she actually initiated a physical altercation, she ended up pushing Diddy's head into a counter, throwing candles and glass at him because she thought he was cheating on her, although he told her that they were in an open relationship. Anyway, after this, he allegedly retaliated violently. According to Jane, he started hitting her, knocking down doors. She had to run from the house. She hid for 2 hours. And she said when she returned, she was forced into an FO. Mind you, this incident happened after that Cassie hotel video was released to the public. But Jane stayed in the relationship with him after that, and she still calls him her lover. He still pays for her house at $10,000 per month, and he pays for her attorney. So again, with Jane, the question is this S trafficking or just a toxic relationship? And honestly, I'm not sure. And here's my concern. If Diddy is convicted of S trafficking based solely on Jane's story, we may be opening a slippery slope. I mean, think about it. There are people in manipulative or deceptive relationships every day. Some people lie, they cheat, they emotionally manipulate. Maybe someone consents to intimacy in the moment but feels used later. But does that mean it was trafficking? That's a thin legal line, in my opinion. And if we're now saying that someone can be federally prosecuted for S trafficking based on emotional coercion or manipulation in a toxic relationship, where do we draw the line? Now, Diddy has the money and elite attorneys to fight back. And I was actually having this discussion with a top legal journalist at the court. And she and I agreed that the problem is really for the average person, especially a black or brown person without that privilege. They wouldn't stand a chance against the government. And we both feel that's dangerous in the long run. Because, I mean, honestly, forget about Diddy. We are speaking about, again, the average citizen who may face a prosecution overreach. Now, don't get me wrong. That's my view with S trafficking when it comes to Jane. And I again feel Cassie was S trafficked. And I do believe the RICO charge is solid against Diddy, and the transportation of S workers across state lines, that's documented. That alone is both a standalone charge and a predicate act for RICO. Prosecutors actually only need to prove 2 predicate acts to prove racketeering, and I think they've got that. So let's go down that list. You have transportation of escorts. Check, as I said. And again, that is also on its own a separate act. Then you have obstruction of justice and bribery, like that infamous hotel video where Diddy allegedly had his chief of staff, Kristina Khorram, coordinate a payoff to the security guard to bury the tape. So that's a check. And allegedly arson involving Kid Cudi's car, possibly another predicate act. Then you have distribution of illegal substances, definitely in play, in my opinion. Now, also during these trial days, we heard from Brendan Paul. He's Diddy's former assistant, who many thought was actually his mule, but he was actually, again, just an assistant. But he testified under immunity. And now he claimed that Jane Doe appeared to consent to these activities and she never seemed under the influence. That was from his point of view. And of course, the defense leaned on that. But I will say just because he didn't see something doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen from her point of view. But he said what he felt he knew. But he did admit that he supplied illegal substances to Diddy, sometimes working with Kristina. And don't forget, Paul got arrested with substances on him boarding Diddy's private plane. So that supports the prosecutor's argument that the enterprise was used to facilitate illegal activities. That's RICO. Now, Kristina, come out wherever you are, because she has been brought up a lot during this trial. Of course, we thought she would testify, but she will not. But her texts and her emails were entered into evidence and read to the jury. So she may not have testified, but she was definitely present when it came to her words. And who knows, she may actually face charges later. Now, she denies all allegations, but again, she really could be charged. Now, other key testimony and witnesses, we also heard from Jonathan Perez, a former employee who described the culture around these FOs, the pressure, the structure. He suggested that some women, like Jane, may have felt coerced even without direct threats. But again, Does feeling pressured equal legal coercion? That again is my question and my fear when it comes to the slippery slope. They also had summary witnesses. They also took the stand. They broke down thousands of texts, receipts, hotel records, and payments. That infrastructure supports, again, the RICO charge. They helped put everything in order so the jury could better understand the charges, the parties, and the timeline. Now, speaking of the jury, there were some issues. One juror was dismissed for being dishonest during jury selection. He lacked candor, the judge said. He claimed to live in the Bronx, but actually lived in New Jersey. So he was not eligible for this trial. Now, another juror suffered vertigo after viewing all those graphic videos. So court was suspended for the day with that. And I believe that was on day 25. So these disruptions, again, cause delays. And who knows, it might impact how this jury processes the emotional weight of what they've seen. But let's wrap all this up. 1, Cassie. I believe she was trafficked. Full stop. Diddy should face time for that, in my opinion. Jane Doe. To me, it's murkier. There are signs of manipulation, but also moments that suggest agency and consent. This may bring reasonable doubt for her side. And as trafficking for Jane, that could be a dangerous precedent overall for our legal system. Again, that's a slippery slope. Then you have RICO. To me, that's proven, and Diddy should serve time for that and the transportation of S workers. But again, let me emphasize, this case isn't just about Diddy. It's about how we legally define exploitation, how far coercion can stretch under the law, and who gets the privilege to fight back in court. This has been H-Boo's Word. I'm Stacey Brewer. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And remember to stay informed, stay sharp, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.